when I'll be taking time off from teaching to pursue other interests, and as the saying goes, recharge my batteries. I do feel that need, I won't lie. Among other things, I'll get a chance to do a thing I have surprisingly little time for, generally, given my choice of professions, and that's read for fun. But can I confess something? Actually, I guess this isn't a great confession. I know you look for great confessionals during chapel, and this is not really surprising to you at all, but here's the confession. I actually find reading for class generally much more fun than reading for fun. Reading for fun is for me not nearly so enjoyable as reading some book for the 5th, the 10th, the 20th time with my students, especially if it's a book that I feel I haven't yet done justice to. And that's just about all of them. Let me see if I can explain why this is so. For one thing, fun is simply the wrong word to describe what you get out of reading when you're really doing it right. Have you ever seen those sort of tacky posters in public libraries with the slogan, reading is fundamental, emphasis on fun, with capital F-U-N, right? And then there's an inspirational picture of like Brad Pitt or Oprah Winfrey holding the book and looking like thrilled, like. Well, I'm trying to urge you to think of reading not so much as fun, F-U-N, but as literally wonderful, full of wonder. Reading is wondermental. Okay, that's really awful. The first thing that needs to be clarified is what I mean by reading, since after all, that verb covers many different sorts of acts. Reading seems to me to exist on a continuum, the two extremes of which are marked by attention on one side and distraction on the other. One can read and yet be very distracted, as for instance the way one reads a traffic sign while en route to, say, the most recent Hunger Games movie. Yes, your eyes register the words sufficiently for you to recognize and respond appropriately to stop. But the majority of your attention will in truth be focused on maybe whether Josh Hutcherson will finally be able to convince you this time that he's actually more attractive than Liam Hemsworth. Should Katniss really be wasting your time on that no-neck, cross-eyed kind of guy? That's just kidding. So the way you read that stop sign, that's minimal reading with a maximum of distraction. The polar opposite of that reading is the way I know each and every one of you read all of your books for your English classes. Attentive. Ashley. Out loud, she went, ah! Attentive to every word and detail of imagery, attuned to the nuances of rhythm and form, effortlessly stretching yourself to register and weigh every possible semantic significance. That is the way you read, Ashley, isn't it? Yeah, of course. And of course, most of your reading will fall somewhere in between these two poles. A detective novel takes more attention than your friend's Facebook update, while an Austen novel demands more attention than the detective novel, though maybe less in turn than Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Perhaps you feel that the Austen novel rewards your attention with truths about the world and our judgments of each other, and that Melville's work, in your opinion, does not. So you find yourself paying very careful attention to Austen's social satire, while your eyes in contrast glaze over a little bit at Melville's convoluted, though strangely lyrical writing. Though I have to say, if that's the way some of you tried to read Moby Dick for Paul last term, that course probably didn't turn out so well for you. Because one thing is clear. The amount of attention we give to a piece of reading is at least in part up to us. The attentive reader of a poem and the distracted or disengaged reader of that same poem will have such different reading experiences that they might be considered to be reading two different poems. And perhaps you yourself have already had the experience of being both readers, that is, of at one point reading something attentively that you had once read lazily and finding yourself now amazed that those words that just once just kind of washed over you somehow now connect to the very centers of your being. On the other hand, the amount that we can be rewarded by reading something is at least in part a product of the words offered. Reading stop signs, though providing you crucial information for preserving your own life and that of others, cannot matter to who you are as a person, despite the care with which you attend to the word. Because traffic signs use language informatively, they aim at the fairest, most immediately understandable use of language possible. So the last thing a traffic sign wants you as a reader to do is pause to analyze its nuances, even to ask, stop when? Would be to misunderstand the stop sign, rather than to be on the way to arriving in a deeper understanding of it. In contrast, language used in its fullest way, such as the way works of literature do, can reward our attention because it presents itself expressively and thus as a mystery rather than as a message. And I mean mystery now, not in the detective novel sense of the word, because a mystery like that can be solved unequivocally, and that's a puzzle, not mystery proper. And for that reason, not unlike other time passwords such as crossword puzzles. No, I mean mystery now more in the sense of the largest truths about the world, ourselves, and each other. The sorts of truths which we can only glimpse partially, and which we can never fully understand. Though solving puzzles challenges our abilities and thus gives us intellectual satisfaction, whether those puzzles be Sudoku or the best means of organizing one's closet after buying too many pairs of shoes over break. Puzzles cannot yield revelation in the way that mysteries can. Genuine mysteries are not solved. They're not soluble. They remain sources of wonder to us and are thus inexhaustibly rich, always retaining our further reflection. Thus, I would argue that there's a deep relation between the mystery of the world as glimpsed through silent contemplation and the type of wonder that reading opens to us. Because the existence of any one thing in the world, that lark in the tree, that mug on the table, is already sort of mysterious to us, we have found ways to record our confrontation with that mystery, most of which we term art. By drawing that mug, by writing a poem about that lark, we engage in a type of attention that opens us to the world around us through our focus on this one particular aspect of the world. The first thing we note about this act of attention is that unlike the attention we pay to, say, a crossword puzzle, there's no natural endpoint to it. In that sense, a drawing is never finished. You might do the best you can do and then call it quits, but you haven't succeeded in attaining that ideal you have in your mind that you set out to achieve. We cannot unravel or even do justice to the mystery of the lark, no matter how long we look at it, how carefully we listen to it, how faithfully we render its bright feathers in watercolors, or its darting movements in words. That's why it's a mystery. So, why isn't the attention we pay to it merely frustrated? Why bother attending to the lark at all? What rewards our attention in this case? What is it that the poet Walt Whitman means when he writes a line such as, "A morning glory at my window satisfies me more than the metaphysics of books"? What exactly is satisfying? Well, in one way, it's satisfying simply to admit to oneself that there are things that cannot be understood, that must be celebrated and loved for what they are rather than puzzled out. But in another way, too, it seems that we focus on trying to understand one aspect of the world clearly in order to remind ourselves of the largest mystery that the world is, and is so wondrous, must remain insoluble. Our attunement to that mystery, precisely because it's beyond our understanding, gives rise to some of the best impulses within us. I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars, Whitman wrote, exhorting us to celebrate the perfection of even the tiniest aspects of nature. The running blackberry, he writes, would adorn the parlors of heaven. But why paint that blackberry? Why write a poem about those leaves of grass? Isn't that falsifying or corrupting somehow the perfect silence of contemplation that should mark such celebration? I don't think so. Poet Mary Oliver, who provided the first of our chapel readings today, tells us that though a poem cannot aspire to the existence of the things it records, the writing and the reading of poetry can nonetheless help us to remain open and attentive to the world around us. She writes, "The poem is not the world. It isn't even the first page of the world. But the poem wants to flower like a flower. It knows that much. It wants to open itself like the door of a little temple, so that you might step inside and be cooled and refreshed, and less yourself than part of everything." This shedding of individuality, this becoming part of everything, seems a strange return for the act of attending so carefully to individual things in the world. But, as Paul McCullough has already reminded us in his October chapel talk, that's exactly what being absorbed by the particular does for us. It connects us to the larger, to the everything, to each other. And in that sense, words, when we really attend to them, are as particular and mysterious as flowers. After all, words are used by humans, and all you need to do is read one good poem to remind yourself that there's more of mystery than the message in any use of language we think of as rich or expressive. Language is capacious and creative enough to accommodate mystery. In fact, though it might seem that language, and you could think of it this way, as a common property of a people, deciphers and unravels the mystery of ourselves by forcing us to make ourselves available to each other through common words, even a very little reflection will prompt you to realize that words can at best give glimpses of the different worlds we each represent to each other. We might use the same words, but we use them in such vastly different ways that it could almost be considered as speaking our own languages. Even with a simple single word such as, I don't know, brown, colorblind, all sorts of things. But because the person next to you might think first of the brown of that favorite fawn brown sweater with the little pink cap she wore that summer she was 8, while you channel the word through, say, your dislike of the cloyingly sweet taste of hot cocoa, or your deep-seated fear of grizzly bears. Oh yeah, you and cold bear, right? Bears. The more you think about our different experiences, cold bear is relevant to everything. The more you think about our different experiences and our correspondingly different associations for any one word we use, the more astonishing it begins to seem that we can use the same words at all. But we can. Language accommodates enormous ranges of meanings and still functions perfectly well, or pretty well. Problems in understanding do occur all the time, but luckily you can always keep talking to straighten them out. And if somewhat complex puzzles are already raised by friends asking you, do you have a brown sweater I can borrow? What sort of friend do you need? Imagine the mysteries that begin to be glimpsed when she's trying to talk to you not about sweaters, but about her feelings about God or death, or her own inchoate belief that telling a lie is a fundamental wrong against the universe. Having souls, we're infinite, and therefore we are necessarily mysterious to each other and to ourselves. As the unique possessor of my soul, no word sums me. No set of phrases can sound my depths. I am untranslatable, writes Whitman in another section of Song of Myself. And you get the contradiction right there. I am untranslatable in Song of Myself. Even when I try my most creative and comprehensive way to say just what I mean, the words I choose are at best tokens, providing glimpses. When I use language most richly, I invent the meanings of words as I speak them. Say, for instance, a friend confides to you, I don't like the feeling of those Hunger Games movies. It's all too brown somehow. And you might be puzzled. You've never heard brown used in that way before. But you try to cite yourself somehow along her use of the word, try to glimpse what she means when she uses it that way. And the mysterious thing about language is that it does still work in those instances. It can and does stretch itself to say new things all the time, if you're paying attention. Language is as familiar and as mysterious as the mysterious beings you rub shoulders with every day, and are so conspicuously rubbing shoulders with right now. This privacy of language is thus not just an unfortunate fact about human experience. Indeed, it's importantly true that we need to consider each other and every book we read as in principle speaking a different language. The first word of our ethical relation to each other is uttered only when we listen to each other's words as if they were remarks from a language we do not as yet speak, but must come to know. You see what I'm saying? Morality demands that we respect each other's potential mysteries. It reminds us that we never understand the person to whom we speak well enough to judge him or her. What it asks of us, therefore, is the infinite responsiveness in and through language that can only occur when language is understood as mysterious rather than as always already saying just exactly what we previously thought. If not getting it at all, you'd reasonably say, oh yeah, those Hunger Games, they're way too brown. You haven't extended yourself at all. You haven't learned anything new from your friend's interesting utterance because you haven't really paid attention to what she might have uniquely meant by it. Not only have you lost a chance to learn something by not paying attention, but you failed to really speak to your friend, to challenge your own familiar sense of brown with her creative and new sense, to really converse therefore. And note that the word converse is not that far removed etymologically from convert and conversion, to change completely. Conversation, is at its highest a transformative process, the best way for two souls to mix and meet, and in that meeting be transformed from what they were to something new and unknown. Now, it's in this way precisely that I see reading as mattering to us. When we read, we do not simply receive messages from some author, nor do we as readers merely impose meanings. No, we engage in conversation with the language of the text. We attend carefully to the words because we have to, because literature uses language in its fullest, most innovative ways. Each poem, each novel is a world, authored to be sure by a human rather than a god, but no less infinite or mysterious for all that. We therefore read best when we read as if each word use could be saying something entirely unexpected and new to us. Though not all books reward us in these ways, for certainly there are many books out there written just to be amusing distractions rather than richly uttered worlds. Yet in the best books and poems, language well and richly used rewards our attention, revealing fuller glimpses of the underlying landscape with renewed efforts and repeated readings. You've probably already in your own life discovered that the best books you read, the books that matter to you most, continue to converse with you, weeks, months, even years after you last closed the cover on your most recent reading of it. So, though I'm happy to be having a sabbatical and to be taking a few months to try to absorb myself in other tasks than teaching, I'll miss these conversations in the classroom. I'll miss my books. I'll miss my students. I'll miss my colleagues. I would say I'll miss Westover too, but here's my confession. In fact, you're going to see me around often enough, lunch, chapel, because I'm taking a stay-batical. I can tell you the complicated reasons for this. This wasn't the original idea, but no, I'll be just down the block. I just won't be here. But the thing is, eating lunch, not the same. Well, I know we all fantasize sometimes about how lovely Westover would be. We could all just hang out here with our friends and not have papers and tests and projects, and for me, grading, hanging over us all the time. But you can't take out the content, the things we attend to here, our books and problems and our objects of study, without taking away the very things that transform us and absorb us. That Westover would be lots of fun, but would offer no wonder. It would fail to command our attention. Our conversations might be fun, they might be silly, but they'd lose the ability to absorb us, as one of Paul's favorite scholars, Mark Edmondson, reminds us, is the point of education. So I want to close by suggesting that every school, every classroom, is or should be much like that cabinet of wonders my friend Mira Bartok, a poet as well as an author illustrator, and a Westover lover herself. She was a graduation speaker here a number of years ago. That cabinet of wonders that she celebrates is the subject of the poem that I excerpted for today's reading. I know that come March and April, I will really, really miss my classroom and all the students who come to it to attend and to be absorbed and to converse. I'll be really jealous of those conversations. I'll picture Felicity happening with all of them. Reading can happen immersively and absorbingly on one's own, sure, but it's those transformative conversations in and through the classroom that are so essential to our ongoing, never-ending project of creating ourselves as selves. While that's the goal of education, that project is undergirded by love. As Paul said a few months back, not messy, emotional, romantic love, or even the strong feeling one has for family members and close friends, but that voluntary love that we extend to each other, that potentially intimate attention to the particularity of the other. Love is knowledge of the individual, writes author and philosopher Iris Murdoch. And that's true whether that individual is an acquaintance, or a novel, or a flower, or a student, or a calculus problem. Calculus problem, yes, because how stupid am I right here? When I arranged my sabbatical a number of years ago, really was this like 3 or 4 years I arranged this, I had no idea at the time it would be during Anne Polina's very last term as head of school. I can't believe I'll be missing Anne's last trimester. And here's the thing about that. When my husband Sam, a minister and who now works as a hospice worker, when he delivers a brilliant and profound sermon, and he does, about how love is the founding word of the universe, I sort of get it when he says it. I sort of glimpse it. But when I see Anne in action here every day with students and faculty, in committees and meetings and conferences and assemblies, I really feel I'm seeing in a concrete way how that voluntary sort of love, characterized by attention, is in truth the first word and the best word we learn to speak here at Westover. And that's because Anne teaches it to us all so very,